Bibles out. Let's turn to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And I was doing some reading in my devotional life, and I found chapter 4 here of 2 Corinthians to be a very encouraging chapter. I know one of the things that Brother David mentioned was how encouraging he's been reading in 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians, and he was mentioning tonight just how encouraging those two books were. And so much of the Word of God is it is encouraging, especially if you know Christ. And so we're going to find some encouragement tonight, I hope. Look here in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 1. It says, "Therefore, seeing we have this ministry, as we have received mercy, we faint not, but have renounced the hidden things of dishonesty, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of God deceitfully, but by manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God." He goes on to say later on in this chapter, he says in verse number 8, he says, we are troubled, but on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. He mentions on in that chapter, he mentions again in verse number 16, he said, "For which cause we faint not." There it is again, that we faint not. And then in chapter 5, we're not going to turn there, but in chapter 5, he mentions it twice. He says, we are always confident. Then he says it again, we are confident. And I like that. I like the thought that Paul is reminding us that we don't have to faint, that we don't have to, in the midst of all the things going on, live with doubt. We can live with confidence in this life. And so I really want to key in on verse number 1 and talk about there. He says, "Seeing we have this ministry, as we have received mercy, we faint not." I want to talk about this ministry of light that God has given us. And, I think it's about a year ago, I did a little series on the ministry and what the ministry is, and how each of us are ministers in our own right. Ministers, I'm a minister. Oftentimes people, I would go to the funeral home, they call me minister or reverend or all these different titles. But really, every one of us are a minister. And I know it really kind of stirred some things in the hearts of some people during that time last year. And I've been drawn back to this again, this thing that Paul says we have this ministry. There is a responsibility that is given to every one of us. And so I think probably if somebody was looking in the windows tonight, they'd look at the crowd here and they go, that's not much going on there. But we know that that's not the truth. That really, if one of us can catch something from the Lord tonight, that one of us, it could affect the rest of us, that would affect other people. And so it's not a number so much, but what has been handed to us and what we do with it. And so we have a responsibility to take the ministry that was given to us and to use it in the right way. And so it is a ministry of light. I want you to look here in verses number 3. We're going to begin there. It says, "But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. For we preach not ourselves, but Christ the Lord, and ourselves your servants for Christ's sake. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, has shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." I don't know how much time you've spent in Genesis chapter 1, but it talks about how there was darkness and God created light. There's a light that is you see it in this physical world. There's certain kinds of light that we cannot even see. But there is a spiritual light that shines into darkness, and there was a darkness in our hearts. We were children of darkness, and God's light shined into our hearts where we were blinded, and in many cases blinded by the god of this world, Satan himself. He's blinded us, and the light of the gospel shined in our hearts into the dark crevices of our soul, and he lighted us. When we believed on him, we became the children of light. And so we have the light shined to us the truth won out. The truth was the master. It won in our hearts. Paul talks about there in verse number 2, he said, but we've renounced the hidden things of dishonesty, not walking in craftiness or handling the word of God deceitfully. You know, we're not trying to manipulate people into doing what we want to do with their life. Paul's saying, look, we've not used dishonesty. We've not used any kind of craftiness. We've not tried to manipulate people into doing things or winning them to Christ by manipulation, dishonesty, craftiness, deceit. I tell you, that is not of the Lord. I don't know, it's been probably a couple of years ago now. Someone called me, and I think I probably know who the group was that called me on the phone and presented themselves in a certain aspect that they were seeking an answer to a question. And really, all they wanted to do is to kind of rail at me about what we believed. And I believe they were Jehovah's Witness from a Jehovah's Witness church. And I said, hang on just a second. I said, you know, I may not be able to give the exact answer you're looking for right here off the tip of my tongue, but I know this. I said, you started with deceit. You misrepresented yourself. And I said, it's a poor thing if you've got to misrepresent yourself and use deceit to spread the light. That is not the way we operate. It should not be in our bag of tricks to deceive people and win them to Christ. That is not part of what we do. We present the light. We show them the light. The light works in their hearts and their lives, and that's the way it happened for you, I hope. I hope somebody didn't twist your arm into the kingdom. I hope that somebody didn't twist your arm and manipulate you to bring you to a place where you eventually trusted Christ. I was given the light. I was given the truth. And it worked in my heart. And so because the light shined in us, because we have this ministry of light that we're to be responsible for, the light shined in us, we are to give the light to other people. Look back in chapter 3, verse number 6, that first line, it says, who also hath made us able ministers of the New Testament. Do you feel able most of the time? Let me put, I said I wasn't going to do this much, but I'm going to call somebody by name. Josh, did you feel able getting up here tonight? A lot of nervousness. Sometimes we don't feel very able, do we? But you know, we are more able than you think. If you have tasted of salvation, there's something God's given you, you could at least talk about what God's done in your life. You know, somebody that is in complete darkness and you know a little bit of the light, that is a big light to share to people. And so it says that he hath made us able ministers. He's rendered us fit. Paul says in a couple of different places, he says in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 7, he says, whereof I was made a minister according to the gift of grace of God given unto me by the effectual working of his power. God's power is working in you. Look, he's working in you to make you an able minister. You have received the light, and because you've received the light, you have a responsibility to share the light and to live a lightened life in front of other people. Wherever you're at, we're going to scatter and go all over this county this week. Different places you're going to be. You're going to be in different stores, different workplaces, different schools, all over this county. And you are taking the light. You are to take that light and to share it with other people. And God is making you an able minister. He'll fill your mouth with the truth. Paul says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 23, I, Paul, am made a minister. God's making you a minister. God's crafting you. And I have absolute confidence in this, that there are people that you can reach and people you can talk to, that you have an in with, that you have an ability to speak to, that I will never have the ability to speak to them in the way that you have the ability to speak to them. They trust you in a way they wouldn't maybe trust me or anybody else in this room. And so let's not do this. I can't. I don't want to hear that from us. That ought to be something that we ought not to say a whole lot of. I can. I'm not able. I'll never be this. I'll never do this as good as somebody else. Well, look, Do what you can do. Embrace this ministry of light that God has given us. And he says here, he says, therefore, seeing we have this ministry. Paul's taken it up. He's picked it up. He says that. He says the second thing, not only do we have a ministry of light, but we have a ministry of mercy. He says, therefore, seeing we have this ministry as we have received mercy. Let me ask you this. What is mercy? What is mercy? Have you ever experienced mercy? Right. Yes, you're right all over that. It is withholding what we do deserve. That's mercy. And so grace is giving us what we don't deserve. And so we deserve this, and mercy says, I'm not going to give you that. Grace says, I'm going to give you something different. Have you ever experienced mercy? Have you ever done something? Maybe when you're in your growing up years, there was something you did, and for whatever reason, this cloud of mercy passed over your parents. They said, you should be getting this. You should be getting something awful. No doubt people were looking at should have gotten many things, and mercy was given, and thank God for it. But you know, that also happened with God. I was talking with somebody this week and discussing about how merciful and long-suffering the Lord has been with me. I tell you, I see it. I see how God has treated me in my life, and there are times that he could have done certain things to me, and he would have been very just in his doing it. Holiness is what God is. Justice is the way he interacts with us. He is a just God, and his mercy withholds much of what we should get. And so we've received mercy. Paul says, I've received mercy. It was given to me. It was withheld, things that were withheld from me. He says in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 13, he says, talking about himself, Paul says, who was a blasphemer and a persecutor and injurious, but I obtained mercy because I did it ignorantly in unbelief. I hope you can say in your life, you recognize the places, you say, I got mercy there. God was merciful to me. God was slow to wrath with me. Oh, I tell you, sometimes, man, I want to go to the nuclear button, just want to push it right there, wrath. And God could do that in his justice, but he's slow to wrath. Aren't you glad God doesn't just get, man, boom, all of a sudden he's hot. The Bible says this, our God is a consuming fire. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God. And so I'm glad he's merciful. And because mercy was given to us in the same way that the ministry was given to us, we are to give mercy in the same way we are to give light. We've received light, we're to give light. We've received mercy, we're to give mercy. I wonder why it's so hard to give mercy to people. Why is that the case, you think? Why is it difficult for us to be slow and long-suffering with people? Why is that? Any answers? Pride, jealousy. I can see that. Any other thought? I just know sometimes it's not very deep in us to treat things with a light hand. And so we are to be that, though. We are to be merciful to other people. If you would turn over to 1 Corinthians. I read this, a week or so ago, and it just really struck me. And 1 Corinthians is what we call it the love chapter, and the word is charity there. Charity is love in action. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse number 6, kind of jumping there into the middle of the chapter, and so when we're reading this, we know that it's speaking about charity. It says in verse 6, it says, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. That's what charity does. Charity rejoices. It doesn't rejoice in iniquity and wrongdoing, but charity rejoices in the truth. It says in verse 7, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth. And so what it's saying there in verse number 6 and 7, 8, it says, charity bears all things. Charity believes all things. Charity hopes all things. Charity endures all things. And so I think sometimes if we're thinking about charity, sometimes if we can do something for somebody, if we can physically present somebody something, we can give a gift, we can give a meal, we can give money, we give of our time, and so to speak. Sometimes that is easier than doing what it's talking about here, but true charity bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And when we think of bearing all things, we're talking about a tenderness towards people. You want to see something that is uncharitable. Let somebody be sitting behind you at a stoplight, and you miss just one beat of not moving into traffic. The light is green. I mean, it's not even hardly a second, and somebody's tapping the horn. They're doing their hands. I hate to see the mirror. I hate to look in the mirror and somebody going that behind me. I don't know what that means, but I'd take it to mean it's not very charitable. They're not bearing all things. There is no tenderness in. And so that ought not to be us. People need a soft touch in life. They need us. It says here that it believeth all things. That's talking about faith there. We have faith in people. We deliver faith. We believe them. We're not believing the worst. We don't jump to the farthest conclusion. We're trusting them. And it says that hope all things. Hope. We're hoping. Hopeful people. It says that enduring. It means that there's a patience there. And so we have received mercy. We have the example of God in our life, and we take the mercy that we have received and we carry it to other people. We've been given the light, and we take the light that we've received and give it to other people. What's that mercy look like? We give them some space. We give them some time. We give them the opportunity. We get off their back. We get off their chest. We don't keep them on the mat. We let them up. We don't rub their nose in it. We try to be merciful. Tell you, we're living in a world that is not very merciful. It is oftentimes very cruel. You look at the animal kingdom, and you watch animals oftentimes will kill another same kind of animal if there's something different about it. And I'll tell you, sometimes humans are like that. We are quick to stamp down anybody that is not quite like us. We push them down. And there is a lot of pride in that. And so chapter 4 here in 2 Corinthians is talking about we have a ministry. We've received light. We've received mercy. And he kind of ends it here in that chapter, 2 Corinthians 4. He says that, therefore, seeing we have this ministry, we have received mercy, he says we faint not. We faint not. That word faint not has to do with to be weak or to fail. And there's been some failure in my life. But I know this, we've been given strength. Paul says it twice in that chapter. He said, we fail not, we fail not. We don't have to be weak. We don't have to fail. That God is enabling us to be ministers. He's enabling us to walk through this world. He's given us the power, the strength that we need. And I'm telling you, you're about to walk into Monday. And if there's a day that you need some help, usually Monday is it. You're about to face things again. You're about to get into the fray of it all again. You're about to deal with people you haven't dealt with all weekend. And God can give us the strength that we need. And so there we have been given strength. He's giving us the strength that we need. Look in chapter 4, verse 16. It says, for this cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. He said this body could fail. There's a weakness in our body, but it doesn't have to be inside of us. He says there's something here that can be renewed every day. There's a vitality, a life that we have inside of us. He says it's possible. There's a possibility of being renewed every day. And I'm telling you, there is a necessity for being renewed every day. You have to be renewed every day to have this ministry that we're going to do. A ministry of light, the ministry of mercy, the ministry of strength. We receive strength, and we're going to give some strength to people. Look at this chapter. Paul says this, and I read the verses a little bit ago, in verses 8 and 9. He said, we are troubled. We are perplexed. In verse 8, he says in verse 9, persecuted. Verse 9, cast down. And we've kind of tasted that verse, that little phrase there, cast down, with the sheep. They're fell over in a ditch. They're in a low place, and their feet are pointing towards the side. That's cast down. Can't get up. Can't get out of it. There are a lot of people like that in the world today. They are troubled. They are perplexed, maybe even persecuted and cast down. But Paul puts this little bitty thing in there and says, yet not. Troubled, yet not distressed. On every side I have trouble, yet I'm not distressed. He said, I faint not. I'm confident in the Lord. He said, I have this ministry of strength that's been delivered to me. He says this. He says, perplexed, trying to figure it out, not knowing what to do. That's a terrible place to be in, isn't it? Not to have the answers that you want, perplexed. But I am not distressed. I'm waiting on God. God's given me the strength to wait. Not distressed. He says persecuted. Persecuted. I think that's a terrible place to be in. He said, but not forsaken. God walks with me. He says cast down, but not destroyed. He says back in chapter 3, he says, our sufficiency is of God. We can hang on because of him. And so we've been given strength in the same way that we've been given mercy and light. And in the same way that we deliver light and we deliver mercy, we are to give other people strength. Tell you what, you're not going to hand somebody strength if you don't have strength in you already. It is hard for you to give other people confidence in God if you don't have it. If your life is full of doubt, I tell you, it's hard with any kind of credibility to help anybody like that. And I think that's sometimes why we crawl into this hole that we go into, and I can't help you. I can't help you make it through the day. I can't give you any answers because I don't feel like I've got any answers. So we better figure it out. We better walk with the Lord, renew our heart every day, renew our mind, get the strength, get the mercy that would enable us to do the ministry. You've been given light. I know most of you well enough to know this. You've been given light. You have experienced the mercy of God. And therefore, you can give the strength that's needed. You can be strong for your family. You can be strong for your kids. You can be strong for your grandkids. You can be strong for this church. And you know, you kind of jokingly said this. What did you say earlier? The best of the best or whatever. And, you know, there's this. This church is only as strong as we are. And so we ought to, I don't know that we're trying to be the best of the best, but there ought to be something in us that we're trying to be excellent for the Lord, that we walk worthy of his calling in our life, that there's something inside of us that we were able to meet on a Sunday morning, we're meeting Sunday night, and to walk out of this place with something. We're not defeated people, we're victorious people. We're triumphant people. We're people that have overcome some things. And so we can take that same thing and give it to somebody else. And may God help us to do that. Because you know this, there are people that need what you have. You say, I don't have much. You got more than what you think you have. You folks are steady people. You're solid in your walk with the Lord. And so we ought to be able to say this, come along with me. Come along, let's walk this path together.